John, you and I have to sit down and talk about how it is on the outside once you leave this place, because I'm contemplating on doing that next year. Madam Chairman, I'm certainly glad that the committee has decided to delay marking up this climate change legislation. The hearings that our committee has held on the issue have reinforced my concerns with the size and scope of the legislative options that Congress is considering. Any legislation that passes through the committee should both reduce our nation's greenhouse gas emissions and make our nation more energy secure. It should include provisions that allow us to fully utilize the domestic resources and responsibly increase our domestic production of oil and natural gas to relieve energy costs and strengthen our energy security. I have long tried to encourage the harmonization of our energy, environment, economy, and national security. This is my 11th year on this committee. Unfortunately, national security concerns have never been prominently considered during my 11 years on this committee. I consider what we've been doing a tail wagging the dog agenda, driven by the environmental part of this four-part harmonization: energy, environment, economy, and national security. For years, the gap in the United States between demand and domestic supply of oil has been widening. U.S. oil production has steadily declined since 1970, when it was nearly 10 million barrels per day, to 4.9 million barrels today. The U.S. consumed an average of 19.4 million barrels per day in 2008. With many of our domestic resources now off limits, we've been forced to seek energy abroad. In 1973, the U.S. imported 6 million barrels per day of crude oil, or 34%. By 2008, these numbers have risen dramatically. Net oil imports were 9.7, or 61% of our total liquid fuel use. In 2006, Hilliard Huntington, executive director of Stanford University's Energy Modeling Forum, testified before the Foreign Relations Committee, of which I was a member at that time, that, quote, the odds of a foreign oil disruption happening over the next 10 years are slightly higher than 80%, end of quote. He went on to testify that if global production were reduced by merely 2.1%, it would have a more serious effect on the economy than Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. And these concerns led me to introduce the National Energy Security Act along with Senator Dorgan. This bill expands development of domestic oil and natural gas and moves us towards sustainable, clean energy production and use by streamlining the permitting of the most promising areas of the outer continental shelf, providing $50 billion in federal loan guarantee authority for low-carbon electricity, including nuclear and advanced coal, and promoting the electrification of our transportation fleet so that by 2050, 80% of it would be electrified, and supporting something very important, a robust, reliable national grid. This legislation is based on a report created by the Energy Security Leadership Council, a group of business and military leaders. I'm sure some of the military people know who are on this committee, who have committed to developing long-term policies that will reduce U.S. oil dependence and improve energy security. The preamble of their report reads, hostile state actors, insurgents, and terrorists have made their intention to use oil as a strategic weapon against the United States. Steadily rising global oil prices add to the danger by exacerbating tensions among consuming nations. Oil dependence, with its incumbent exporting of American wealth, exacts a tremendous financial toll on our country. Excessive reliance on oil constrains U.S. foreign policy and burdens a U.S. military, the protector of last resort for the global economy. And I'd be interested to know if the witnesses here today share some of these concerns that were in this preamble of this report that these distinguished group of people put together. Our problem today is, instead of considering this big picture, we're considering an overly complicated and partisan approach that would simply exacerbate the situation. Indeed, the financial burden that the Waxman bill places on the domestic oil industry will force the offshoring of U.S. refining capacity and jobs, leaving us at the mercy of foreign nations for refined gasoline supplies. I've talked to individual after. First of all, we haven't been building any refineries. Now we're finally doing it. And with this legislation, forget any new refineries in the United States. They're going to move overseas. Right now in India, they're building the biggest refinery in the world with the idea that we'll pass this legislation, our guys will be forced overseas, and we'll start getting more oil, refined oil from India. And we should be very, very concerned about this as our nation. Our security is in deep jeopardy today, and we better wake up. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you so much. Senator Lautenberg.
Thanks very much, Madam Chairman.